Have you ever noticed how certain moments in life seem to carry a different weight, a silent strangeness that you can't explain with words? Perhaps you have started to feel that something has changed within you, but you don't know exactly what. The conversations that once seemed interesting now sound empty. The places you used to frequent no longer make sense. And the people around you, even those who have always been close, seem to speak a language you no longer understand. It's not that you have become arrogant or distant, it's that something inside you is awakening. And when that happens, loneliness arrives like an inevitable shadow, not as punishment, but as a natural part of the process of spiritual awakening. This feeling of being alone does not mean that you are lost or that you have taken a wrong path. On the contrary, it is the clearest sign that you are beginning to see beyond the illusions that keep most people asleep. The truth is that spiritual awakening does not come accompanied by fireworks or celebrations. It arrives quietly, often disguised as restlessness, deep questioning, an inexplicable feeling that there is something more beyond what your eyes can see. When you are spiritually awakening, the world begins to reveal its hidden layers. You realize that society functions like a great theater where everyone plays roles rehearsed since childhood. There is an invisible script that dictates how you should behave, what you should value, who you should be. And for years, perhaps decades, you followed that script without questioning, believing that it was reality. But now, something has changed. A crack has appeared in that perfectly constructed facade, and through it, you can glimpse something different. It is both frightening and liberating at the same time. Frightening because it means that everything you believed may not be as solid as it seemed. Liberating because you are finally beginning to see things as they truly are, not as you were told they were. And it is precisely at this point that loneliness intensifies. Why? Because most people are still deeply asleep. They do not question. They do not investigate. They simply accept what is given to them and move on, comfortable in the familiarity of collective illusion. When you begin to awaken spiritually, you realize that you can no longer participate in this game as before. Conversations about superficial things seem like a waste of energy. The daily dramas that once consumed your attention now seem trivial. You are not becoming indifferent or cold. You are just seeing through the veil. But here is something crucial that you need to understand about this loneliness that accompanies spiritual awakening. It is not a flaw of yours, nor a sign that something is wrong. It is simply the natural consequence of an expansion of consciousness. Imagine that you have lived your entire life in a dark room with other people. Everyone is used to the darkness. They talk about the shadows on the walls, create stories about them, build an entire reality based on what they can perceive in the dim light. Then suddenly your eyes begin to adjust, and you notice a beam of light coming through a crack. You follow it and discover a door. When you open it, the sunlight floods your eyes. At first, it hurts. It is uncomfortable. You want to go back to the familiar darkness. But something in you knows that you can no longer pretend that light does not exist. You try to share this discovery with the people in the dark room, but they do not understand. To them, you are talking about something that makes no sense. They are comfortable where they are, and so you find yourself alone, standing in the doorway, between two worlds. This is the lonely place you find yourself in when you are spiritually awakening. The loneliness of spiritual awakening is different from ordinary loneliness. It is not just the absence of company. It is the deep feeling of living in a reality different from the people around you. You may be in a room full of people and still feel completely isolated because no one there can connect with what you are experiencing. Your questions have changed. Your values have changed. Your way of seeing the world has changed. And when you try to express this, you realize that words are not enough. How do you explain colors to someone who has never seen? How do you describe a dimension that others do not yet perceive? It is like trying to translate a language that has no equivalent. And then you fall silent. Not by choice, but by necessity. You learn that some things cannot be shared, only lived. And this realization deepens the feeling of being alone on this journey. But there is a hidden wisdom in this loneliness, and it forces you to look within instead of seeking external validation. When you can no longer rely on others' opinions to confirm your reality, you need to develop your own internal compass. And it is precisely in this solitary process that you find your true essence, that which has always been there but was covered by layers of social conditioning. Think of all the times you tried to fit in, shaped your opinions to please others, silenced your deepest truths for fear of rejection. When you are spiritually awakening, this game becomes impossible to continue, not because you have become rebellious or defiant, but simply because you can no longer fit into a mold that does not reflect who you truly are. And this frightens people. They sense, even if unconsciously, that you are no longer playing by the same rules. This makes them uncomfortable because your presence becomes a mirror reflecting the very cages they have chosen to inhabit. No one likes to be reminded that they are living a life they have not questioned, that they are following a path they did not consciously choose. Therefore, often people distance themselves from those who are awakening, not out of malice but out of self-preservation. Your light, even if faint and nascent, is uncomfortable for those who prefer to remain in the familiar darkness. And so, the loneliness increases. Relationships dissolve. Friendships fade. You find yourself increasingly alone, not because you have abandoned others, but because the paths have naturally diverged. Take this moment to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment on the city from which you are watching. Your participation strengthens our community and helps spread these reflections to more people who are also awakening. But here is something that is rarely said about this process of spiritual awakening. The loneliness you feel is not permanent, nor is it the final destination. It is a transitional phase, a narrow corridor through which you must pass to reach a deeper understanding. Think of it as the metamorphosis period of a caterpillar inside a cocoon. Inside there, alone and in the dark, a radical transformation occurs. The old structure must completely disintegrate before the new form can emerge. If someone interfered in this process trying to help the caterpillar out before the time, they would actually be harming it, preventing its wings from strengthening. The same happens with you. This loneliness you feel is not abandonment, it is transformation. It is the sacred moment in which you are remaking yourself from the inside out, and this is a work that no one can do for you. No one can awaken for you. No one can see for you. No one can walk this path in your place, and because of this, there will inevitably be times when you feel deeply alone. But this loneliness carries a quality different from mere separation. It is a loneliness pregnant with potential, a fertile void where something new can be born. When you are spiritually awakening, you begin to realize that much of what you considered real was merely a collective construction, a tacit agreement among people to believe in certain things. Money has value because we agree it does. Status matters because we decided it matters. Social hierarchies exist because we maintain the belief in them. But what if you start to question these agreements? What if you realize that you can choose not to believe in them? This does not mean that you will completely ignore the structures of society or live like a hermit in the mountains. It means that you begin to relate to these structures differently, with the awareness that they are human constructions, not absolute truths. And this shift in perspective is profoundly lonely because few can see it this way. Most people are so immersed in the game that they cannot see that it is a game. They believe that the rules are immutable, that the limitations are real, that there is no other way to live beyond what they know. When you begin to see through these illusions, it becomes difficult to find someone with whom to share this vision. And so you walk alone for a while, carrying knowledge that you cannot easily convey. There is also another important aspect of spiritual awakening that contributes to this feeling of loneliness. You begin to realize that no one can fill the void within you. Throughout your life, you have probably tried to find completeness through other people, relationships, external achievements, material possessions. But when you are awakening spiritually, all these attempts begin to reveal their illusory nature. You realize that no relationship, no matter how intense, can fill the existential void you feel. No professional achievement can give lasting meaning to your existence. No object can satisfy the deep hunger that lives within you. This realization is simultaneously devastating and liberating. Devastating because it means that all the strategies you used to avoid confronting your essential loneliness no longer work. Liberating because you can finally stop seeking outside what can only be found within. And when this understanding settles in, you naturally turn inward, not as an escape, but as a return to the source, to the silent center of your own being that has always been there, patiently waiting for you to stop looking outward long enough to perceive it. Awakening spiritually also means beginning to feel a deep connection with something greater than yourself, something that cannot be named or captured in concepts. You may call it universe, consciousness, God, Tao, existence. The name does not matter. What matters is the direct experience of this connection. And when you begin to feel this, paradoxically, loneliness intensifies and at the same time transforms. It intensifies because you realize that most people live disconnected from this deeper dimension, too busy with the superficial concerns of everyday life. But it transforms because you also realize that you have never really been alone. There is an invisible web connecting all things, and you are an inseparable part of it. The loneliness you feel is not real separation, but merely the dissolution of the false connections you maintained. It's as if you had spent your entire life in superficial relationships, and now, for the first time, you are experiencing what it means to be truly connected. And this true connection does not depend on the physical presence of other people. It exists regardless of external circumstances. You can be alone in a room and feel deeply connected to all of existence. Or you can be in the midst of a crowd and feel isolated. Loneliness and connection cease to be states determined by external factors and become internal experiences that you can access regardless of where you are or who you are with. One of the greatest challenges of awakening spiritually is learning to live with ambiguity, with mystery, with not knowing. The mind wants clear answers, definitive explanations, absolute certainties. But spiritual awakening dissolves all these certainties. You discover that the more you awaken, the less you know. The answers that once seemed obvious now reveal infinite layers of complexity. The beliefs you held with conviction begin to unravel, and you find yourself in unknown territory where there are no maps, where each step is taken in the dark, guided only by a subtle intuition that does not always fully trust. This is deeply uncomfortable. The mind resists. It wants to return to the safety of old certainties, even if they were illusory. But something in you knows that you cannot go back anymore. You have eaten from the fruit of the tree of knowledge and can no longer pretend innocence. And then you need to learn to walk with uncertainty, to embrace the mystery, to feel comfortable in discomfort. This is a skill that develops alone, in the solitude of your own being. No one can teach you to trust the void. No one can give you the courage to let go of the banks and allow yourself to be carried by the current of life. This is something you discover on your own, through direct experience, through the courageous facing of the loneliness that accompanies spiritual awakening. But there is a hidden grace in this solitary journey of spiritual awakening that is rarely recognized at the beginning of the process. The loneliness that seems so painful in the early stages eventually reveals itself as a portal to a different form of connection, deeper and more authentic than anything you have experienced before. When you stop seeking external validation, when you stop trying to fit into molds that no longer serve, when you accept that you are walking a path that few understand, something extraordinary happens. You begin to attract people who are vibrating at the same frequency. Not many, because the path of spiritual awakening has never been a busy road. But those few souls who cross your path recognize something in you, and you recognize something in them. It's as if there is a silent language spoken only by those who have undergone the same transformation. A glance is enough to convey volumes of understanding. A brief conversation can touch depths that years of superficial interaction would never reach. These connections are rare, but when they happen, you realize that they were worth all the loneliness you went through to get there. Because these are connections based not on need or dependency, but on mutual recognition of something essential that cannot be faked or manufactured. The truth about awakening spiritually is that you are not really distancing yourself from people. You are distancing yourself from the masks that people wear, including your own. And when the masks fall, what remains? Sometimes nothing. Sometimes you discover that certain relationships were sustained only by the masks, by the projections, by the roles each one played. When you remove your mask and present yourself authentically, often the other person no longer knows how to relate to you. It's nobody's fault. It's simply that the foundation of the relationship was not real. It was just a choreographed dance of characters. And when you stop dancing, the music stops. This can be painful. You may feel that you are losing important people, but what is really happening is that you are making space for genuine connections, for relationships based on truth, not on convenience or habit. And these true connections can only arise when you are willing to remain in solitude long enough to meet yourself first. Because how can you authentically connect with another if you do not even know who you are when all the false layers are removed? Awakening spiritually also means developing a different relationship with silence. Before, silence may have been uncomfortable, something to be filled with conversations, music, distractions. But as you awaken, silence becomes a friend, a teacher, a sanctuary. In silence, you hear whispers that the noise of the world always drowned out. In silence, you feel presences that the constant agitation always masked. Silence ceases to be absence and reveals itself as fullness. And in that silence, paradoxically, you discover that you have never really been alone. That there is a constant presence, a witnessing consciousness that has always been observing, always been present, even in the moments when you felt most isolated. Some call this your true self, others call it soul, others call it pure consciousness. Regardless of the name, the experience is recognizing something in you that transcends circumstances, that remains unchanged even when everything around you changes. And when you find this inner presence, external loneliness loses much of its power. You may be physically alone, but feel internally complete because you have discovered the company of your own essence. It is important to understand that the process of awakening spiritually does not have a definitive endpoint where you suddenly become enlightened and everything becomes perfect. It is a continuous unfolding, a gradual revelation that happens layer by layer, sometimes over an entire lifetime. There will be moments of stunning clarity followed by periods of confusion. There will be days when you feel deeply connected to everything, and days when loneliness will return with full force. This is natural. Awakening is not linear. It is not a staircase that you climb step by step until you reach the top. It is more like waves that come and go, each carrying you a little deeper into yourself, a little closer to the essential truth of your being. And throughout this process, loneliness may be your most constant companion. But over time, you learn to see this loneliness not as an enemy, but as an ally. It keeps you honest. It prevents you from getting lost again in collective illusions. It reminds you that your path is unique, that your journey cannot be compared to anyone else's. And in this acceptance, something relaxes. You stop fighting against loneliness and begin to inhabit it with grace. So, if you are feeling lonely now, if you realize that people no longer understand you, if you feel that you are walking a path that no one around you can see, know that this is not a flaw. It is a sign that you are awakening spiritually, that you are seeing beyond the superficial appearances of existence, that you are beginning to touch deeper dimensions of reality. The loneliness you feel, it is the temporary price of authenticity. It is the necessary space for transformation to happen. It is the silence in which the truth can finally be heard. Do not fight against it. Do not try to hastily fill it with distractions or superficial relationships. Dwell in it. Explore it. Allow it to teach you what you need to learn, because on the other side of this loneliness lies a freedom that you cannot yet imagine. A freedom to be who you really are, without excuses, without masks, without fear. And this freedom, when finally achieved, is worth every moment of solitude you went through to reach it. You are not lost. You are awakening. And the fact that you are feeling alone is simply the confirmation that you are on the right path, even if it is a path that few have the courage to walk. If this content resonated with you, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment your city so that we can build together a community of people who are awakening. Your participation makes all the difference. Until the next video.